So the G87 up here on a mountain road like this is sublime. I mean, this is where the car really shines. So M2 for this year, for 2025, I guess you would call it the LCI already, even though it's really only been out for about a year. I did receive a couple updates, and one of those is to the powertrain. Gone is the 450 horsepower figure from last year, and now it is allegedly making 473. Now, my butt dyno would tell you that it's really probably something that starts with a 5 when it comes to horsepower figures. Last year, a lot of people were putting the 2024 M2s on the dyno, and they were actually getting about 460 or so to the wheel. So again, if you're accounting for like a 10, 15, 20%, usually about 15% drivetrain loss factor, that's putting it much closer to that like 500 figure. So whether or not it actually received that power bump, I don't know. I mean, allegedly on paper, yes, but the point is, it's just a ton of power. Now for the manual, you do get about 40 foot-pounds less of torque. You're getting about just over 400 foot-pounds of torque for the manual, whereas with the automatic, you're actually getting about 443 now, so quite a bit of torque. I have not really been yearning and feeling like this car is underpowered in any way, shape, or form. Let's talk a little bit about gearing now, because obviously with the manual, that's very important, and people are gonna wanna know about that. When it comes down to the gearing of this car, again, 6-speed manual, gearing is a little bit on the long side. Some people don't like that. I do wish that second, third, and fourth were definitely quite a bit shorter and more closer to each other, and, you know, kind of leave a bit more space between fourth, fifth, and sixth, as, you know, sixth being the overdrive. Is it a bad thing? Does it ruin the driving experience? Not really. Although I will say on a mountain road, you're pretty much going to be stuck in third and fourth gear almost the whole time. I'm pretty much sitting just in third gear almost the entire time. There's enough low-end torque that even under, say, like 2,500 RPM, still feels lively. But yeah, once you get it above about 3,500, oh my gosh, it does wake up quite a bit. But third gear on most kind of winding mountain roads or on track is going to get you through the majority of it. So you're not shifting as much as you would think you would with a manual. That being said, on the other hand, if you had your gearing too closely together, usually what that's going to do is it's going to lower your overall top speed. If you're really putting yourself out of the power band too much, it can just make driving on track with gearing a little bit too closely. You're shifting a little bit too much, it might actually disturb the car when it comes to, you know, you've got to be with a manual, you've got to be careful about when you're choosing to shift, you know, based on your braking zones, what corner's coming up, you know, what your next corner after that's going to be like. Like I said, there's enough low-end torque that even with the longer gearing, it's totally fine. I'm not feeling like it's ruining the experience whatsoever. All right, so gearing a little bit on the long side, not the end of the world, but it's, like I said, I'm still fun. I'm still shifting, just probably not as much as you might imagine. Because again, you've kind of got to get that balance between keeping your car within the power band, and then also, again, your overall top speed, like the overall, you know, final drive, final gear. I don't mind it. I'm having fun. Now let's talk about the shifter, the actual manual driving experience. So when you get down to it, this manual, it does unfortunately have to live with BMW's reputation of rubbery shifters. Does this car still have that? To a degree, yes. I would say on the spectrum between something that is, you know, very snick, very direct feeling, something that's a little bit vague and rubbery, this kind of splits the difference. It's definitely improved. If anyone's driven like an E46 or E90 era shifter, not only do they feel pretty brittle and a little bit delicate, they're also very rubbery. That's kind of where the shifters got the reputation for BMW. But this one, not bad. It's definitely improved. It definitely feels a little bit more direct, and it definitely feels, I wouldn't quite say it's like a Honda Civic Type R shifter that actually is quite a bit more direct. This, it's fine. I think people complain about this way too much. And one of the problems is because manuals are becoming so rare these days, people always compare it to like a 911 GT3 shifter, the shifter that's in like a 911 ST or something like that. You have to remember, those cars are $200,000 by the time you add on options. pay, you know, bribe the dealer for an allocation. Some of those cars are approaching $500,000 or more. This car starts at about $60,000 for 2025. This costs as much as probably half the options on one of those cars that we're trying to compare it to. For what it is, I think people are complaining too much. I really think that that's a problem. People are a little bit too fickle sometimes. For this year, even though the car's only been out for a little over a year, there's actually been a number of updates. Some are calling it an LCI, but really I'm gonna go through and talk about some of these updates, and we'll talk about kind of if any of the driving performance has been impacted because of it, but largely a lot of it has been aesthetic changes, and I think it's for the better. But the reality is I'm bittersweet when it comes to this car because it's a fantastic car and it is super fun to drive, but it's also an ending. This is the last BMW M car that we're ever going to be able to buy with a manual. Now, when you look back at the history of BMW M3 coupes have historically always been kind of the bread and butter of what makes the BMW M division known for what it is, along with the M5 sedan. And this particular car is, I think, the real spiritual successor to a lot of the older M3 coupes that we've known and loved. As a matter of fact, a lot of people have complained about how the M2's gotten bigger, but if you look at it size-wise, it's really pretty much an M3 coupe. If you look at the wheelbase between an E46 M3 coupe and an E92 M3 coupe, this is actually within half an inch of both of those cars. It slots right in between, so that gives you an idea as to roughly the size of this car. The M4 is fantastic and incredibly capable, but it's grown in size so much, it's become something of a car that splits the difference between a GT car and a sports car, whereas this is kind of that true, dedicated, daily usable sports car in a size that makes it more playful. So one of the biggest updates for the 2025 M2 as compared to the 2024 is its power output. BMW is stating that this S58, the 3-liter inline-6 twin-turbo, is now making 473 horsepower. There aren't too many other changes. One important thing to note, this car is equipped with a 6-speed manual transmission. Because of that, you're getting about 406 foot-pounds of torque. If you do option the ZF 8-speed automatic, you're actually gonna get 40 extra foot-pounds of torque just by switching to the automatic. So that's partly why it feels faster in addition to the faster shifting. One important thing to talk about this car is the weight. BMW's official weight figure is just over 3,850 pounds, but if you look at that a little bit more closely, what you'll notice, that weight figure is actually for the automatic, not with the carbon package, not with the carbon roof, not with the carbon bucket seats. When you equip this car as is with the manual transmission, that saves actually about 50 pounds right there, and then with the full carbon pack that this car comes equipped with, you're saving roughly an additional 50 pounds on top of that. I actually went to the scales, weighed this car, and found out that the weight that I was getting for this car was 3,735 pounds. So that's actually roughly just under 100 pounds difference between this and the F87 M2 competition that had the S55. Very similar motor. Again, the S58, there's been some updates and changes. The actual exterior design of the car is essentially exactly the same. There's no real minor tweaks or changes when it comes to the actual physical sheet metal of the car. But one of the changes that is new for 2025 is all of the new colors that are now available. Now what we're seeing is for 2025, this is one of the 3 additional individual colors that are on option. This is Java Green. It's roughly like a 3,200 option, and it's stunning, especially in the sunlight. There's so much color and depth to this color. There's so much flake. Depending on the shadows and where you look at it, it really looks just stunning. I didn't think I'd be a fan, and now I absolutely love this spec. In addition to that, there's Voodoo Blue, there's also Vegas Red, and there's also Grigio Telesto Metallic. It's kind of a Lamborghini color. It's really cool. I'm not a fan of grays, but that one's really good. And then you have Skyscraper Gray and Portimao Blue Metallic. So kind of, oh, and Sao Paulo Yellow, how can I forget? So there's a nice amount of variation when it comes to the color and what you can choose, which I think is really nice for an M car. One other change that's available, there was only 2 different wheel options when the car first launched, either black or diamond cut for the 19-inch and 20-inch wheels. Now, one of the options that you can get are these silver wheels. They look great. I think the contract, whoever spec'd this car out in the press fleet did an amazing job. But I will say these wheels are pretty difficult to keep clean. Believe it or not, I just cleaned them before I drove here. So keep that in mind. If you're gonna get these wheels, try and get them ceramic coated maybe. They otherwise look fantastic. Now, the next thing when it comes to the updates on the car, we'll go inside and I'll show you some of the updates on the interior of this car. So for 2025, I'll show you some of the other interior updates to this car. There's really, I guess, 2 or 3 major changes that we can talk about. The first is iDrive 8.5. The previous one had iDrive 8. They look very similar. However, what you'll notice is under the HVAC controls, they've changed them up a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to get to some of the items, like for when you want to change your fan speed, it's just a little bit easier. There's one less button you have to push to get that done. And then also right here, the seat heating and the steering wheel heating are just right here on the main screen. So it's just a little bit easier on the HVAC control side of things. The other change for this year are the HVAC controls and the ambient lighting. So you'll see you can actually rotate these to open and close and adjust which way they're facing. It's kind of cool. And then more importantly, the big update here is this ambient lighting that we're seeing. It's more of an indirect lighting. It actually shoots it down onto the surface and kind of disperses it. Makes it a little bit easier on the eyes at night, but it still looks really good, I think. This particular car comes equipped with the carbon pack. It's an almost $10,000 option, which might seem like a lot. However, when you actually go through and individually option up a lot of the things that this package includes, you technically save a little bit of money. So what comes with the carbon pack? So one, you're getting a carbon fiber roof, so no sunroof. That helps shed weight right up top, helps lower the center of gravity. You do get this carbon fiber trim throughout the car, which looks fantastic. And also, my favorite part are these carbon bucket seats. You can option these individually if you want. Again, if you're a bigger person, you might have some trouble fitting in it. But what's nice is you get all the benefits of a nice carbon bucket. It holds you in incredibly well. So for track use, or if you're, frequently on a canyon road, you might want to consider these. I have found that despite having this kind of strange carbon fiber piece in the middle of the seat, it doesn't really get in the way of me activating the clutch at all, pedal whatsoever. So not much of an issue there. Incredibly comfortable for driving. I spent 4 hours in LA traffic yesterday and I was fine in these seats. But again, they shed about 12, 13 pounds per seat compared to the regular comfort seats. Again, I think if you're not going to be going to the track all that often, maybe you don't need these, but they are fantastic and they look super cool. So that's pretty much some of the interior updates. And then one last thing that I forgot to touch on is this Alcantara steering wheel. It looks identical, again, in terms of form and function and everything, to the leather steering wheel. It's just now you have this Alcantara on the exterior. It feels super good in the hands. I really love a good Alcantara steering wheel. It's even got this nice little red mark up here on the center. I mean, just otherwise, this is just a fantastic interior and such a nice place to spend your time. Even with my driving position the way it is, I still have plenty of room. So this is actually a fairly usable car as long as you're probably under about like 5'10". It's really not a bad sized car. It's kind of nice how this car slots really well between being sporty and fun and still being kind of shockingly practical. Even the trunk is 14 cubic feet of trunk space, which is pretty big. So the G87 up here on a mountain road like this is sublime. I mean, this is where the car really, really, really shines. It is so good. I mean, this car loves corners and it just keeps asking for more. I think one of the things that I love about this platform, this chassis, it is so confidence inspiring. Between that and the level of grip that you get from this car, it's constantly begging for more, and you can really start to push this towards what you think the limits are, and then you find out the limits are even higher. I absolutely love the confidence this car gives you, and it does that through a couple different ways. I mean, number one, when it comes to the chassis, this thing is just so stiff. It just feels like one giant block of machinery. There's nothing about it that feels flimsy or, really kind of wondering what's going on with the car. I mean, you feel everything, especially with these nice carbon fiber bucket seats that come with the carbon fiber package. It just holds you in so well, and it really gives you an idea as to what the car is doing. So even if steering feel is not the best now that we all have these, electronic power steering racks instead of the hydraulic, you still have a wonderful idea as to what's going on with the car when you put it into a chassis, and you kind of feel everything through that. Not only is the chassis just incredibly stiff, and again, that's part of where the weight comes from in this car. When you look at the car, there is so much chassis stiffening and bracing everywhere on it, and it really shows, and that's where it shines. The suspension, I'll admit, this adaptive suspension, it's a little bit on the stiff side. As a matter of fact, for most of my driving, I still keep it in the comfort setting, even in, sport mode and, track mode. It's just a little bit too stiff in either of those modes. Because the reality is, unless you're on a very, very well paved, extremely smooth track, you do want your suspension to kind of help take care of a lot of those bumps. And again, on a road like this that's pretty rough, you want to make sure that your compression and rebound is helping take care of all those bumps. Because again, if you set it to be too stiff on a road that's, pretty beat up like this, honestly, what it does, it actually kind of upsets the handling of the car a little bit more. But again, in comfort mode, man, this thing on a road like this, just sublime. I can't say enough good things about it. So yeah, this suspension, once you get it in comfort, really is just dialed in for a road like this. The actual tires themselves, again, 285 in the rear, 275 up front. These are Michelin Pilot 4S tires. They're good tires. Again, they've kind of been the standard go-to sports car daily driven tire, 300 tread wear range for a while now. But I will say there's definitely other options. I would probably put like a Potenza race on these if I knew I was going to be going to the canyons a little bit more. And then if I knew I was going to be going to the track, I'd probably end up putting some kind of 200 tread wear tire on there. We're looking RE71 RS or maybe Sport Cup 2s. But honestly, I'm kind of a bigger fan of some of the other options out there if I'm going to go on track. Just what a wonderful driving experience this is. It just makes me happy when I get in this car and start to drive it and push it hard. There are so few cars today that are sold with a manual, especially with this level of high performance. And the closest things that I can think of, I'm looking at Porsches that cost 2 to 3 times, probably 4 times as much by the time you bribe a dealership to get one. So that kind of puts the M2 and M3 and M4 manuals in a class of their own. I mean, really what the M2, the G87 M2 with a manual is, this is the true spiritual successor, I would say, for the M3 Coupe. The M4 and the M3, they've just gotten so big, they're almost really like M6 size. They're kind of in the position where like the M5 used to be, in that they kind of are a really good dual role for, a good cruiser, a good GT car, and still something very sporty and very capable. This is much more in that sports car category and segment and size. And really in terms of footprint, I mean, this is almost identical, like slots right in between like an E46 and an E92 M3 size. I mean, it's gotten bigger. Some people don't like that. I like it because I'm able to fit behind myself. There's a ton of practicality in this car. It's kind of that perfect size. Anything bigger, yeah, I would say it starts getting a little bit too big, but it doesn't make it super tiny to the point where, using it on a day-to-day basis, you feel cramped or you can't, fit passengers behind you or anything like that. It's livable. So like I said, this is the real spiritual successor, not only in size, but I would say in experience to what the previous generation M3s are. I know it has the 2 badge. I know that this is part of the 2 Series Coupe family and not the 3 and what they've changed. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I feel like this really actually is the true successor to the M3. And again, at price point too. I mean, it's the price point you're looking at, mid to upper 60s, potentially in the 70s, depending, if you get a carbon pack and every single option, one of the individual paint colors. But it's accessible enough to the point where this isn't, this is really an aspirational car, something that, a lot of people could actually potentially go out and buy if they start doing well for themselves. All right, well, we are sitting here in another lovely traffic jam on an LA freeway. We'll talk about what it's like to live with this car on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that I really like about the M2 is that despite the fact that it's a really good car in the canyons, it's something that would do phenomenally well on the track. It's also something that on a day-to-day basis, even with the 6-speed manual, it's not compromised. This is actually a very good car to kind of live with on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that I'm surprised about is despite the fact that, depending on how you have the exhaust set up, whether or not you have BMW iconic sounds on or off, it's not terribly noisy on a day-to-day basis. The NVH is actually reasonably well controlled in a car like this. But despite all that, again, when you do want to enjoy the sound of your S58, you can absolutely go ahead, turn on iconic sounds, open up the exhaust valve in sport mode, and it does sound phenomenal. However, I will say this, a lot of people complain about iconic sounds. A lot of people complain about fake engine noise. Would it be better if it were authentic? I guess so. I'm one of those people, I guess I'm just not bothered by it. I do enjoy the sound. Whether it's real or not, who cares? And if you are that concerned, you can always purchase an exhaust. And remember, BMW does make a titanium M Sport exhaust. Talking with the rest of the car, NVH, really not bad. It's relatively pretty quiet on here. Whether or not you can, how much of the engine you could hear, it's kind of up to you. But in its quietest setting, if you're focused on comfort, yeah, this is totally livable. It's not overbearing. It's something that is still comfortable to drive. It's still luxurious enough. Feels well built, but at the same time, again, it offers you a lot of that sports car stuff without being too compromised. As far as the rest of the interior, these carbon fiber bucket seats that are available with the carbon fiber package on this car, they're very comfortable, incredibly supportive. People forget about the importance of seats. What's nice about a good bucket seat in a race car, and it's not just a safety aspect. Part of it is in terms of your ability to kind of connect and feel with the car. A lot of times those carbon bucket seats really kind of help you understand what the chassis is doing. Again, you're not getting 100% of your feedback through the steering of the car. A lot of it comes from the chassis too. And when you're so well buckled down and so well secure in your seat, you actually help kind of get a little bit better feel and understanding of the car, and it gives you more confidence. A lot of people really underestimate the importance of a good seat, and these carbon bucket seats are just, oh, they're so good and they're comfortable. Again, yesterday I spent, like I said, probably about 5 or 6 hours throughout the entire day in LA traffic. Wasn't bad. My back doesn't hurt. It's comfortable. They're even heated. They're good seats. I could do a long road trip on this. It doesn't bother me. This center carbon fiber portion on the lower part of the seat in between my legs, it is a little bit weird. It kind of looks cool. I haven't found that it gets in the way of me being able to operate the manual on this car. I've heard some people complain about it. For me, it hasn't been much of an issue. Maybe it's just my body type. iDrive 8.5, this is one of the updates for 2025. Compared to iDrive 8, there's just a couple more shortcuts for your HVAC controls, making it just a little bit easier to be able to change out, your fan speed or your seat heating. It's nice. I think that all could have been avoided, and a better option is if they just added one more row of HVAC controls, just like in iDrive 7. iDrive 7 I still think is probably my favorite of the BMW operating systems, just because, like I said, there's that perfect balance between physical buttons for your HVAC controls, for your music, but again, it still has a really nice looking touchscreen for Apple CarPlay. So again, it's that good balance. I really feel like if there's room, if they put that one extra row of buttons for the HVAC control, I think BMW iDrive would be probably the best operating system out there. The heads-up display, very usable. I love it. Driving on a day-to-day basis, it's nice to be able to just kind of see, again, your speed right there, your Apple CarPlay, Apple Maps directions are projected on there, which just makes it very hard to get lost. Really allows you to kind of focus on the road and not have to look around when it comes to getting directions to where you're going whenever you put in a destination. Yeah, everything else about this interior, it's your standard 2 and 3 Series type interior. Again, with the 2 Series, you do get a slightly smaller center console here than you would with the 3 Series, and a slightly smaller storage bin here where the cup holders are. In terms of cabin volume, the G87 M2 has grown in size, and we know this. But now that I've actually really got to spend time with it, I was a little bit worried whether or not it would be too small. So people always ask about the size of this car and whether the rear seats are even usable. Well, I was able to fit my kitten that I was bringing to the vet the other day back here, no issue. Now, I'm 5'8", 5'9", depending on which dating app you're on, you find me on. Even with my driving position the way it is, I still have plenty of room. So this is actually a fairly usable car as long as you're probably under about like 5'10". It's really not a bad sized car. It's kind of nice how this car slots really well between being sporty and fun and still being kind of shockingly practical. Even the trunk is 14 cubic feet of trunk space, which is pretty big. Really, this car in terms of overall footprint is actually slightly larger. It's basically about the same size as an E92 M3. I would say the M2 is now actually the true spiritual successor to the M3 Coupe. And what I mean by that is the M4 has grown so much in size now, it's basically an M6. I mean, it's really like a 6 Series Coupe size. And while that's great that it has, an enormous trunk now and the additional space in the rear seat legroom and everything like that, this is still big enough. I really am not feeling or needing more room. I've now spent a week with the 2025 M2. And I have to say, the small updates to this car I really like. The availability of colors on this car now, the different wheel options, the updated interior. It's just a really nice car to live with on a day-to-day basis. This car does such a good job at blending some of the newest, best parts of BMW. I mean, you've got a fantastic infotainment system, great technology, incredible engine and chassis tuning, but then also kind of brings in a lot of the things that we've known and loved from BMW coupes in the past. It's still engaging. That 6-speed is probably one of the best transmissions that BMW's ever put into a car. Is it perfect? No. Is it the best feeling 6-speed manual I've ever driven? No. Is it still fun and engaging? Absolutely. I have no complaints about this, and if I had the choice between an automatic and a manual, I'm going to get this manual every single time. It was still easy to live with. I didn't mind driving it in traffic. Returned okay fuel economy, but it is still blisteringly quick, and every shift that you get right is just so satisfying. So the fact that I'm kind of getting the best of both modern and old worlds when it comes to the M2 with a manual, I think this is the better car to buy. I don't care about the numbers. I don't care about the power figures, whatever. You can have your automatics. If you want to be a true driving enthusiast and save the manuals, get the M2 manual. This is the better buy. You're going to be so glad that you bought this car with a manual. Thank you for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, especially if you liked how hard I worked on keeping these wheels clean.